Kalispera σας. Good evening. Dear colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another lecture at the Archaeological Research Unit. Our speaker today is Christian Vonhoff, who returns to the Archaeological Research Unit's public lecture series after some years in order to share with us the latest results of his research. So I would like to welcome him back and introduce him to those of you who have not yet had the chance to meet. Dr. Vonhoff studied classical archaeology at the Friedrich Alexander University Erlangen-Nuremberg, from where he received his master's degree with honors. He continued his studies at the same university at a doctoral level, and he received his PhD in 2007. The title of his doctoral thesis, and I shouldn't say that, there's too many Germans in the audience, but I will try, Darstellungen von Kampf und Krieg in der minoischen und mykenischen Kultur. Okay. After finishing his PhD, he taught archaeology at the same university, but then he received a grant for the postdoctoral fellowship at the German Archaeological Institute in Athens for a research project entitled Die materielle Kultur der früheisenzeitlichen Zypern, more or less 1100 to 750 before Christ, in Spannungsfeld lokaler Traditionen und externer Kulturenflüsse. And he will tell us maybe something about this later. From 2014 to 2016, he was in charge of the study of the iron objects from the 2009-2013 Samos excavations at the German Archaeological Institute. And then he worked as a lecturer in classical archaeology at the Institute of Archaeological Studies at the University of Bochum. He is currently working at the same university as a postdoctoral fellow funded by the Gerda Henkel Stiftung, and he's working on a project on the role of copper trade and metalwork as a driving force for cultural development in the end of the second and the beginning of the first millennium BC, using Cyprus as an example. Dr. Vonhoff has published widely on Cypriot and Phoenician metalwork and has co-edited a volume of the proceedings of the POCA conference, which was held in Erlangen in 2012 and was published in 2015. This evening he will deliver a lecture entitled Metallic Status Symbols from Cypriot Early Iron Age Elite Burials, Helmets, Shepherds, Crooks, Mace Heads, and Tridents as indicators for social rank and elite self-conception within Cypriot society of the late 2nd and early 1st millennium BC. Christian.
Thank you. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, dear students, first of all, I would like to thank Lena, of course, for her kind introduction, as well as the whole staff of the ARU for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. As we can already learn from the oldest work of Occidental literature, the Homeric epic of the Iliad, the circle of heroes that were engaged in the battle for Troy were characterized by a wide range of status symbols, such as splendid weapons, extraordinary metal vessels, or even regal symbols, in such a way resembling a situation that seems to correspond to the preserved archaeological record from Cypriot early Iron Age elite burials at the transition from the 2nd to the 1st millennium BC. In what follows, reference will be made to the term elite burial in connection with tombs containing an impressive and wide-ranging spectrum of prestigious artifacts such as bronze metal vessels, jewelry, imports and heirlooms, as well as weapons, cult objects, or clothing accessories made of precious materials. The early Iron Age period in Cyprus, a time span starting with the transitional period of late Cypriot 3B and spanning the following cyprogeometric stages, without doubt can be called one of the most formative phases in the island's history, including, among other things, demographical changes such as the emergence of new elites, obviously detached from former Bronze Age societal structures. This transformation, in turn, manifests itself in an eclectic material culture benefiting from strong external cultural influences, a phenomenon that can best be observed by richly furnished tombs belonging to the island's elites of that time. Within this methodological setting, my today's lecture will focus on 4 lesser known categories of status symbols made of both bronze and iron, namely helmets, shepherds' crooks, mace heads, and tridents, that are sparsely or not mentioned by Homer, but which nevertheless came to light in early Iron Age tombs that can clearly be identified as elite burials. Some of you may now argue that all classes of these objects could also have been used as objects in daily life, may it be weaponry, agricultural tools, or fishing equipment. Nonetheless, I will be trying to show you that the envisaged categories of objects indicate an extraordinary social status of the interred individuals, may it be sovereigns, warrior princes, high-ranked officials, or other prominent members of the Cypriot society, but at the same time referring to the uniqueness of an islandscape defined by various external cultural influences. Helmets in Cyprus in general are very sparse. Let us begin with the newest and complete find of a conical bronze helmet going back to the Palepafoscalis excavations of 2008-2011 by Eftasios Raptou, who is also here today, published by him together with Vassos Karageorgis in 2016. The helmet derives from tomb 188, dated to the Cypro-geometric 1 period, possesses a diameter of 21 to 22 centimeter and a height of 27 centimeter. It has a molded conical shape, a pointed top with concave sides, and a plain border. Around the border are to be found 15 perforations for fixing an interior dressing, probably of linen or cloth. Above those perforations are 21 protuberances in repoussé, arranged in 3 horizontal parallel rows. Besides that, a total of 4 more independent perforations can be found on the helmet. 2 perforations above the rows of protuberances on the front side of the helmet, 1 perforation on top, and 1 on the back side. Again, above the perforations running around the border. Other than suggested in the excavation report, the 2 perforations on the front probably weren't meant to hold an emblem or a similar item, but probably together with the other one on the top and the one on the back, respectively, were designed to hold a crest, most probably made of a horsetail or even of a now lost metal construction. But where do we have to look for the origin of this to the present day unique helmet specimen? The conical basic form, the 3 circumferential rows of protuberances in repoussé technique in the lower third of the helmet, above the 15 perforations around the border, as well as the 4 perforations designed to hold a crest, are lacking immediate counterparts in early Iron Age Cyprus, as well as in the simultaneous Mediterranean world. In the look for possible earlier or later parallels, let us start with the geographically closest possibility, the Levant and the Near East. According to typological criteria, the Cypriot helmet from Palepafoscalis in general seems to find immediate forerunners as well as later counterparts that point to a region of origin in the Near East. Various relief representation of bronze-crested helmets dating to the early 9th, 8th centuries are known from the North Syrian, Assyrian region, more exactly from Karkemish and Karatepe. They can be traced back to late Bronze Age Hittite North Syrian helmet traditions, e.g. those found in the sculptures of the King's Gate of Boashkoy Hattusha, which is the layer 4B, the 14th, 13th century BC, or on Egyptian wall paintings in the tomb of Amenmose in Thebes, which is the 18th dynasty, so to say the second half of the 15th century BC. The sparse existing archaeological depictions at first sight seem to put the crested helmet from Paleppa Foscalis tomb 188 therefore on the tradition of the 2nd millennium BC Hittite North Syrian region, where the form of the crested helmet becomes comprehensible since the second half of the 2nd millennium BC, but only preserved in the case of representations. If one considers the date of our Cypriot crested helmet in the Cypro-geometric 1 period, the piece could probably be addressed as the earliest Iron Age specimen of this genuinely late Bronze Age Oriental helmet form, which probably found its way to the island of Aphrodite as a Near Eastern, maybe North Syrian import. Its isolated date in Cypro-geometric 1 also could characterize it as a link between the older Oriental crested helmets of the 2nd millennium BC and the later Assyrian bronze cone helmets from the 9th century BC onwards. But there also remains another possibility regarding its region of origin. The famous and extraordinary rich furnished tomb 40 at Kurion Kaloriziki, which commonly is dated to the late Cypriot 3B period, among other things, yielded some mysterious objects of bronze. To make it short, as we all probably know the story, the late Hector Catling, together with the so-called Falara from Kaloriziki tomb 40, wanted to reconstruct a shield out of the bronze remains that reminded him of the shields carried by the warriors on the famous so-called warriorways from Mycenae, dated to the late Helladic 3C period, that is to say, the 12th century BC. Another attempt to reconstruct the scattered bronze remains from Kaloriziki tomb 40, this time as some sort of decorated corselet, body armor, or textile garment, with decoration on neck and waist or breast, respectively, was then undertaken by Buzek and Kudlichkova in 1988. In 2012, then the riddle was finally solved by Hartmut Matthäus and his wife Gisela Schumacher-Matthäus, to whom I am indebted for letting me use their reconstructed material. Actually, it was her to put the puzzle together, as I was told by him. The bronze remains were parts of two cheek pieces of a helmet, decorated with concentric embossed rosettes with dotted punches in between and on the cheek piece surfaces. Here we have a drawing of the reconstruction with the missing parts replenished. That's what they probably may have looked like. In this context, it is worth mentioning that another pair of nearly identical, but this time undecorated and way more complete cheek pieces came to light in the course of the excavations by the Department of Antiquities conducted by Evstasios Raptou in tomb 144 at Paleppa Fosplakis in 1999. The tomb is dated to the Cypro-geometric 1 period and was published in 2014 by Vassos Karageorgis and the excavator. The difference between the both pairs, besides the missing decoration of the Plakis specimens, manifests itself also in a much denser row of perforations or stitch holes running around the borders of the cheek pieces. Nonetheless, the shape and dimensions in general are very close to the specimen from Kaloriziki tomb 40. There are no hinges, but the cheek pieces have some larger perforations at the top, which may have been used for attaching them to the body of the helmet. After this brief excursus, when going back to our cheek pieces from Kaloriziki, we can find some parallels referring to the rosette decoration from Enkomi in Cyprus, Athens and Pylos in Greece, as well as in, well, I have to spell it, Rhiniastenkirali in Hungary. If we now, furthermore, at the bronze bands from Kaloriziki tomb 40, that at first together with the cheek pieces have been interpreted as a shield decoration, we receive a bent metal crest of a helmet that together with a missing calotte could lead to the following reconstruction, which you see to the right. From the Aegean, more precisely from the Submycenaean tomb 27 at Tridents, a crested composite bronze helmet with sickle-shaped cheek pieces and a calotte of 2 spheres of bronze with zigzag bands worked azure and fastened to a cap of textile or leather is preserved. The cheek pieces differ from those of Kaloriziki as they are narrower, while the cutouts for mouth and eye are curved and not as circular and as sharply defined as in Kaloriziki. The decoration is limited to a circle of tiny dots with a larger dot in the center. As has already been stated by the excavator Nikolaos Verdelis back then, it is a helmet unique in the Aegean, probably being influenced by Urnfield helmets dating to the 13th, 12th centuries BC, in shape as well as in ornament. A good comparison from the Urnfield culture furthermore manifests itself in the stray find of a crested helmet from Pasluk in Salzburg, Austria, which also shows a rosette decoration on its cheek pieces, also being different on formal grounds, I have to admit. So a definite transfer of the rosette motif on the Kaloriziki cheek pieces from the Urnfield cultures, that is to say Austria and the Balkans, or even further to the north, eventually via Greece, and maybe even accompanied by the type of the crested helmet itself, also seems to be a possible exchange route. The other possibility regarding the origin of our 3 Cypriot specimens of crested helmets would lie in the adaptation or derivation of the helmet type itself from the Near East. Nonetheless, the rosette motifs clearly originate in the Urnfield cultures around the 13th, 12th centuries BC. To support an origin of the type of the crested helmet from the Urnfield cultures, one could also take into account that the same route has been taken by the so-called Naue-2 swords before finding their way finally to Cyprus. In addition, also later Cretan depictions from Fortezza or the Idaean cave could hint to a transfer of the type of the crested helmet to Cyprus via Greece, but it's a little bit anachronistic, I have to admit. So, if we now remember that our helmet from Palepa Foscalis tomb 188, by showing perforations on the front, the top and the back, can clearly be identified as a crested helmet, we altogether have only 3 specimens of this type deriving from the whole of early Iron Age Cyprus. Furthermore, there is also the slight possibility that the piece from tomb 188 may even have possessed once now lost cheek pieces itself, maybe even of the same type as the 2 other cheek pieces from Kaloriziki tomb 40 and Palepaphos Plakes tomb 144. But wherever the origin of our 3 Cypriot early Iron Age specimens may have been in the end, it can be stated that all 3 of them have been found in extremely rich furnished tombs, in such a way suggesting that they have rather been understood as precious status symbols than as objects designed for actual warfare by their previous owners. Let us now continue with our second class of monuments, the so-called shepherd's crooks, as Hector Kettling already called them back in 1964. Although this class of bronze objects is not directly mentioned within the Homeric epics of the Iliad and the Odyssey, there are still some interconnections between the written and the archaeological record. Most eye-catching and revealing is the fact that the leader of the Achaeans, Agamemnon, is described multiple times as a shepherd of the host within the Iliad. The only known early Iron Age specimen so far is made of bronze and derives from tomb 409 at Lapithos, which was unearthed during the Swedish excavations of 1927-1928 and is dated to the Cypro-geometric II period. It has an overall length of 17.5 centimeter and is characterized by a rounded socket with 2 rivet holes for the attachment to a wooden rod and a tapered, more or less S-shaped curved upper part in its outward appearance, thus more or less resembling the shape of even modern shepherd's staffs. Tomb 49 at Lapithos, in which no skeletal remains were found, without doubt can be addressed as a rich furnished burial containing jewelry, a fragmented iron sword, a bronze bowl with a sunken base, a fragmented iron obolos, as well as a bronze statuette of a white goat. The shepherd's crook, that also was found within Tomb 409, was interpreted by Catlin as an object of ceremonial use, whose purpose could not clearly be defined. One may, at first sight, also exclude the possibility that it was used as an utilitarian tool that in daily life served the herding of a flock. But by assuming that ancient as well as modern shepherd's crooks traditionally persisted of the perishable material of wood, so there seems to be some kind of extraordinary significance when it comes to the bronze specimen from Lapithos, tomb 409. Despite the isolated date and the typological peculiarities regarding the early Iron Age shepherd's crook from Lapithos, a total of 7 more late Bronze Age specimens of this class of monuments is known from Cyprus to the present day. They also display around it by the majority slit socket and derive from the Trésor de Bronze and the Stylianou hoard in Enkomi, the old tomb in Sindar, and the settlement of Hala Sultanteke. The remaining 3 examples are of unknown Cypriot origin and are currently kept in the Metropolitan Museum in New York, 2 specimens, and the Cyprus Museum in Nicosia, 1 specimen, respectively. The proposed date in Cypriot Geometric 2 by Einar Gjerstad for the shepherd's crook with curled loop-like tip in New York can only be described as speculative due to its unknown provenance. A typological similar specimen of also unknown origin kept in Nicosia nowadays is dated to the LBA instead. One has to admit that on formal grounds, the Cypriot LBA shepherd's crooks differ slightly from the early Iron Age piece from Lapithos, since none of the mentioned specimens shows a similar S-shaped curved hook with a tip pointing upwards, but a simply curved hook with a tip pointing downwards, in the case of 5 specimens, or, as already mentioned before, a loop-like tip, which is attested by 2 specimens. The question concerning the origin of the Cypriot bronze shepherd's crooks is also not determinable exactly. While Claude Scheffer wanted to recognize 2 Middle Eastern examples from Nuzi Yorgan Tepe with a dating from 1550 until 1350 BC as forerunners of the Cypriot specimens, René Dusrat and Hector Catlin preferred a derivation from the Aegean, relying on the prevailing Aegean influence in Cyprus around 1200 BC, combined with a description of rulers or kings as shepherd of the host by Homer. However, the first approach should be dismissed due to the chronological difference between the mentioned Near Eastern and Cypriot examples, whereas the archaeological absence of evidence for shepherd's crooks or depictions from the late Bronze Age Aegean does not support the second hypothesis either. In this context, one also should consider that ancient shepherd's crooks were presumably mostly hand-carved wooden implements, which due to the ephemeral material are no longer archaeologically comprehensible today. On the other hand, metal-made specimens are still visible within the archaeological record, presumably in the case of medieval and modern cleric bishops' crooks. Based on the archaeological and textual evidence, however, it seems plausible to trace the Cypriot shepherd's crook back to Egyptian roots, where, according to the preserved archaeological evidence, such devices functioned as I quote, "A symbol of royal or divine power carried together with a flail by Osiris or the pharaoh." An Egyptian origin of this special kind of ruler symbolism is furthermore underlined by numerous depictions and or sculptures from the 19th, 18th dynasties during the era of the so-called Egyptian New Kingdom, a period of time which is traditionally dated from 1550 until 1070 BC. The selected examples shown here are from Thebes, Abydos, and the Temple of Khnum at Elephantine. To sum up the evidence so far, relying on the sparse overall archaeological record expressed by the existence of just one bronze shepherd's crook from the whole of early Iron Age Cyprus, there are further striking hints to be found that this item has to be understood as an object referring to status and power regarding its former owner. The precious bronze material, the solar-tested appearance during the early Iron Age period, the find spot in a rich furnished suprageometric tomb, as well as the indirect references by Homer, archaeologically as well as literally, seem to underline the postulated function of our shepherd's crook from Lapithos as a status symbol belonging to some kind of sovereign. By taking into account the numerous Egyptian representations where shepherd's crooks, often together with flails, are always depicted in connection with the godlike pharaoh himself or the Egyptian god Osiris, an interpretation as a status symbol indicating a princely rank of its bearer without doubt seems the most plausible hypothesis in this context. I would not like to go as far as to ascribe the interred owner of the shepherd's crook from Lapithos as a pharaoh-like king or a shepherd of the host in a Homeric sense, but certainly he, or maybe even she, should be interpreted as a local authority, doubtless of some kind of ruling character. So, our third category, mace heads made of bronze and iron also represent a category of objects that is only occasionally attested within early Iron Age Cypriot elite burials. The major part of the surviving specimens are made of bronze. To the present day, there is only one piece attested made of iron. The bronze mace heads can be assigned to two different types. The so-called knob type mace head, characterized by a cylindrical shaft and a central ribbed swelling displaying elliptic projections or lozenges, whereas the integral parts are made in one cast or separately. The second bronze type, the so-called rosette or star mace head, shows a bifurcated head consisting of two hemispheres, each ribbed in the form of an 8-pedaled rosette, with a large cylindrical hole serving as a socket. Finally, the currently singular early Iron Age Cypriot mace head, made of iron, embodies the type of the simple round mace head. Here we have the find spots of the early Iron Age Cypriot bronze and iron mace heads. As you can see, there are only 4 up to date which can be mentioned. The type of the bronze tubular mace head with central ribbed swelling and elliptic projections, or lozenges, is documented by a total of 5 specimens from early Iron Age Cypriot elite burials, and 3 more pieces of unknown provenance. They have a height between 7.5 and 18.7 centimeter and an average socket diameter of 2.9 to 3.3 centimeter. The diameter of the central knob measures between 3.8 and 7.8 centimeter. This type of mace head, furthermore, can be divided into 2 variants. The socketed mace head with a round central knob and elliptically protruding embossments, our variant 1, shown here, and the socketed mace head with an elongated central knob and lancet-shaped projections, this the variant 2, shown here. In his treatise of the, on formal grounds, divergent Luristan bronzes, Peter Kallmeyer generally used the term facet or pomegranate in referring to the West Iranian socketed mace heads, displaying a central knob of polyhedron shape. Interestingly, he mentions the early Iron Age bronze mace head from Amathus, tomb 5, as a comparable counterpart to his Oriental specimens. The 5 bronze mace heads with a central rib swelling displaying elliptic projections or lozenges derived from the necropolises of Amathus, Aios Tichonas, and Palepa Foscalis in southern Cyprus, as well as from Tamasos in central Cyprus. In the case of the two pieces, no exact dating can be obtained due to the extensive reuse of the respective tombs. On the other hand, a reliable dating is offered by the piece from tomb 188 of Palepa Foscalis, dated in Cypriot geometric 1, the typological comparable specimen from tomb 6 of Aios Tichonas, dated to Cypriot geometric 3, and a specimen from Tamasos, tomb 12, belonging to the Cypro-Archaic 2 period. Since the mace head from Amathus, tomb 5, on formal grounds is very close to the specimen deriving from Aios Tichonas, a round central swelling with 6 elliptically protruding projections and an identical groove profile of the socket, a dating to the Cypriot geometric 3 period seems plausible here as well. For the other mace head from Amathus, tomb 334, Notakuro postulates a dating to the Cypriot geometric 3, Cypro-Archaic 1 periods, despite the fact that no clear indications can be derived from the associated tomb context due to the long occupation and multiple use. The original function of the mace head per se, a wooden stick with a stone at its tip, as a primitive and archaic in-fight weapon remains undisputed. In the Eastern Mediterranean region, for example, mace heads made of stone recalling the shape of spheres or piers with simple grooved sockets or perforations are already known from the Neolithic period on, whereas the mace head pierced on both sides in hourglass style remained a leading form even during the Chalcolithic and the early Bronze Age. Early specimens made of copper, based on the shape of pear-shaped stone specimens, are documented from the Near East since the Chalcolithic, for example from the grotto at Nahal Mishmar, while at the same time stone mace heads made of various, often rare types of rock continued to enjoy great popularity until the end of the late Bronze Age. Cylindrical bronze mace heads with cast figural trimmings and or rows of warts then are to be found during the Meschelem and the Ur-1 period, that is to say the 4th, 3rd millennium BC, in large numbers, while during the second half of the 3rd millennium BC, socketed bronze mace heads with humped rows and slender bronze mace heads with ribbed knobs in the upper third, the so-called Naramjim mace heads, appear for the first time. In the late 3rd and during the 2nd millennium BC, the mace head in Mesopotamia and northern Syria then gradually loses its significance as a weapon and is considered instead as a mythical attribute of gods or a votive offering, proved by finds of stone and occasionally metal specimens in temples, as well as through various inscriptions. Towards the end of the 2nd millennium BC, the function of the mace head as a ruler's ceremonial weapon or as a sign of dignity belonging to the ruler's palace was established, as can be seen by the inscription of Hammurabi or the relief depiction on the pedestal of Tukulti Ninurta, which shows the king as an adorant. At the beginning of the early 1st millennium BC, mace heads with elaborately decorated heads are depicted on the Assyrian palace reliefs of Adonazipal II, Sargon, and Asurbanipal as attributes of the royal entourage. The mace head bearers are usually depicted in long robes, more seldom in short aprons, within the framework of tribute scenes during military campaigns or the presentation, punishment of defeated prisoners. Thus, in the Near East, the class of early Iron Age bronze mace heads, on the one hand, marks a departure from the originally archaic primitive weapon originating in the early stone mace heads, thriving its way to a symbolic god's and later ritually connoted ruler's weapon up to a status symbol. Given this setting, a comparable function as a high-ranking status symbol also seems likely for the Cypriot bronze mace heads mentioned before. My colleague Notakuro also assumes such a function as a sign of dignity or status for the corpus of the Cypriot early Iron Age bronze mace heads, whereas she is willing to interpret them as insignia of high-ranking officials belonging to the metal industry, which cannot be proven. Hartmut Matthäus also recognizes a sign of dignity in the genre of Cypriot mace heads, more precisely some kind of scepter, which can be interpreted as a royal symbol expressing the exceptional social status of its respective owner. Late Bronze Age forerunners of our two variants of the mace head with a central swelling and elliptical or lancet-like projections are not adhesive from Cyprus as well as from the remaining eastern Mediterranean region. Therefore, we should speak about a class of objects that developed during the first millennium BC. A formal derivation of the Cypriot mace heads with a central knob and elliptical or lancet-like decoration from the Near East still seems to be the most plausible possibility. According to Eva Braun-Holzinger, the mentioned Cypriot bronze mace heads undoubtedly have to be classified as imports from the Near East, since there are no LBA Late Bronze Age forerunners on Cyprus and only a few early Iron Age equivalents from northern Syria, more precisely from Sinjili. A Near Eastern origin is also proposed by Hartmut Matthäus for the category of early Iron Age Cypriot bronze mace heads. Besides the lack of forerunners from Late Bronze Age Cyprus, the uncertain chronological position of the Cypriot material, as well as the dating of the non-Cypriot pieces, is problematic. As already mentioned, among the Cypriot finds of socketed mace heads, only 3 pieces from tomb 188 at Palepa Foscales, tomb 6 at Aios Tichonas, and tomb 12 at Tamasos can be allocated a certain date to the periods Cyprogeometric 1, Cyprogeometric 3, and Cyproarchaic 2, respectively, while the chronological position of the remaining 2 pieces remains speculative due to the repeated use of the respective burial chambers. However, due to close formal parallels to the securely datable specimens from Scales and Aios Tichonas, the remaining 2 pieces from Amasus, tombs 5 and 334, should also be attributed to the period Cyprogeometric 3. From the Near East, typological analogies to our Cyprian bronze mace heads came to light in the settlement of Sinjili, the Jat Horde, as well as the temple of Tarbishu Sherif Khan. The find spot of the bronze mace heads from Sinjili does not permit an exact dating of the pieces, but the 8th century BC seems plausible here. A specimen comparable to the Cypriot bronze mace head of variant 2 has an elongated central knob with lancet-shaped projections. The socket and the central swelling are adorned by 2 bulges at the top and bottom, between each of which there is a double bulge. A more distant parallel can also be found in a bronze mace head with an undecorated central knob from the Jat Horde, slightly shifted from the center and framed by 2 beads. According to the excavator Michael Arzi, there are also several other previously unpublished bronze specimens of this type from Megiddo, which dates to Iron Age 1, about 1200-900 BC, and Kiryat Yermoni, which is also dated to Iron Age 1. Additionally, from the Assyrian Tabishu Sherif Khan near Nineveh, 2 inscribed stone tubular mace heads with bronze inlays are preserved, which can be dated to the second half of the 9th century BC, representing gifts of the ruler Salmanassar III. Despite the absence of socketed bronze mace heads from Assyria, this indicates at least a knowledge of the North Syrian repertoire of this kind of monument. In summary, it can therefore be stated that the above listed Cypriot mace heads should be classified as Near Eastern imports, which presumably found their way from northern Syria to the island of Aphrodite by simultaneously fulfilling a function as a status symbol before finally being deposited in the rich furnished tombs at Amathus and Paleppa Foscalis. Our second type of early Iron Age bronze mace head, the rosette mace head or star mace head, is characterized by a two-part thickened middle knob building out an 8-petaled rosette on each side. It is known only once from a secured datable Cypriot elite burial of the early Iron Age period. The preserved specimen measures only 3.6 centimeter in height and has a socket diameter of 1.9 centimeter. The diameter of the knob is 4.5 centimeter. The specimen was found in tomb 547 in the necropolis of Amathus, dating to the Cypriogeometric 3, Cyprioarchaic 1 period. Also in the case of the rosette mace head, a function as a status symbol has to be assumed. On the one hand, the small size of the rosette mace head per se makes its use as a weapon for warfare rather unlikely. On the other hand, various representations of rosette mace heads on Neo-Assyrian palatial reliefs of the first millennium BC also illustrate a status-like function of this object category in the Middle East. In Assyria, for example, archers with mace heads often appear within the entourage of the ruler, accompanying the king in tribute scenes, military parades, or the presentation of prisoners. Furthermore, bearers of mace heads also occasionally stand behind the seated ruler in banquet scenes or take part in ceremonial affairs, often accompanied by flanking umbrellas and or fronts. When shown in military undertakings, they never seem to intervene with the mace head in immediate fighting scenes. Explicit illustration of rosette mace heads are to be found among the depictions of the palace reliefs of Azonazipar II and Shalmaneser III. It's about the 9th century BC, first half and second half more or less. Furthermore, glazed bricks or ivories from Nimrud dating to the 9th century BC also show depictions of the kind of rosette mace heads. Late Bronze Age forerunners are also lacking for the type of the rosette mace head. So again, one may argue for the emergence of a new class of monuments here. According to the testimony of the Assyrian representations from the 9th century BC onwards, it can be assumed that our sole Cypriot example of the bronze rosette mace head also relies on Near Eastern influences, originating there during the 9th century BC, as is demonstrated by a specimen from the Iranian Hashanlu in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Typological parallels to our rosette mace head can be found in Cyprus itself. A bronze rosette mace head with a perforated, thickened middle knob building out an 8-petaled rosette on each side in the Metropolitan Museum in New York shows close typological parallels to the piece from Amathus. Another bronze rosette mace head kept there displays a multiple grooved 2-part knob which seems also almost like shell-like in view. In contrast, only a bronze rosette mace head from the West Iranian site of Warkabut, it's the Iron Age 3, about 850 to 650 BC, and an undated bronze rosette mace head from Marash in southeast Anatolia can be compared to the Cypriot specimen. Further parallels have not yet been detected, maybe due to the current publication state of Near Eastern archaeological material in general. Nonetheless, the Assyrian depictions of rosette mace heads without doubt represent a princely or aristocratic symbol, an interpretation that might well be assumed for our bronze rosette mace head from Amathus. The type of the iron mace head is also only attested once for richly endowed Cypriot tombs of the early Iron Age. The heavy corroded piece has a knob with a diameter of 8 centimeter. The piece derives from the first burial layer of tomb 74 which is dated to Cypriogeometric 3 or Cyprioarchaic 1, in the necropolis of Paleppa-Foscales in southern Cyprus, and therefore represents the earliest find of an iron mace head on Cyprus up to date. Similar to the previously discussed bronze specimens, this mace head should also be comprehended as a status symbol, which compared to the softer bronze material was now converted into a simple spherical shape with an iron. As has been already laid out above, the iron mace head of the Greek warrior Aretus is mentioned in the Homeric Iliad as an archaic weapon of war, whereas in our case the extremely small dimensions do not point to this kind of purpose. The strong corrosion of the piece, as well as the simplicity of the round form, which was simply drilled throughout its middle, deny any closer typological classification or analysis of origin. It can only be stated that there are no late Bronze Age forerunners either, so that one may speak again about an object created during the first millennium BC. An alleged counterpart from the Teke tomb G, the 9th century BC, from the Knossos North Cemetery on Crete, unfortunately is not to be found within the publication, so no striking parallels can be listed here. However, it is worth mentioning a second iron mace head of elongated round form with a pointed upper end from Tomb 5 at Tamassos, dated to the Cyprioarchaic II period, which, despite the obvious formal differences and the undisputed chronological distance, represents the currently second known iron mace head specimen from Cyprus so far. The last category of status symbols presented here, the iron trident, is only proven once within Cypriot early Iron Age elite burials. The fragmented specimen measures 32.8 centimeter in maximum width and has a weight of 1096.8 gram. The iron trident was uncovered in 1999 during rescue excavations in Tomb 142 in the necropolis of Paleppa-Foscales on the southwestern coast of Cyprus, and is dated to the Cypriogeometric 1 period. Regarding the function of this unique type of monument, various hypotheses have been made up, including its use as a stabbing weapon, a fishing instrument, or a cult object with an indefinite function in burial rites, as well as a tool for skewering meat from a cauldron during a banquet, or simply a tool for roasting meat. However, the preserved proportions of the trident, with a reconstructed total length of 80 centimeter or more, compared to the existing diameters of early Iron Age bronze cauldrons, make a practical use unlikely and speak against its use as a flesh hook. Another interpretation, preferred by me, lies in a metaphorical meaning of the trident as a princely status symbol or insignia of rank, not least exemplified from an anachronistic point of view by the trident belonging to the Greek god Poseidon. Furthermore, the singular formal appearance and chronologically isolated position of the iron trident within the material culture of early Iron Age Cyprus probably points rather to a precious status symbol than a profane commodity related to aristocratic feasting. Such an assumption is further suggested by the find spot of the extreme richly furnished tomb 142 at Paleppa-Foscales. Bronze Age forerunners referring to our iron trident can be found on Cyprus itself. The earliest utensil to be mentioned here is a small bronze socketed trident from the Middle Cypriot period that derives from Swedish tomb 21 in Lapithos and probably has to be interpreted as a so-called flesh hook. However, on formal grounds, as well as in dimensions, it is not to be moved into the vicinity of our iron trident from Plakis. Another bronze trident from the so-called Perahort, which is dated, unsurely dated, Middle Cypriot 3, Late Cypriot 1, which instead of a socket has a wire netting for attaching the handle and also divides typologically clearly from our early Iron Age iron trident, represents the second oldest Cypriot example for this category of objects. Finally, a parallel formerly close to our iron trident from Palepafos can be seen in a bronze specimen from Hala Sultan Tekke's richly endowed tomb 23, dated to the late Cypriot 3A period. The piece, measuring 87.5 centimeters, has a long, tapering tubular socket with 3 overlapping bulges at the lower end, which merge into a central round section base. On both sides of the base, S-shaped curved arms emerge, while the tip of the central prong is showing traces of a barb. Other examples of tridents are not known from Cyprus, but in this context, a view to neighboring Middle Eastern regions proves to be particularly revealing. Thus, the category of tridents is well documented for the Near Eastern and the Anatolian region during the Late Bronze Age and Early Iron Age, while formally differing specimens are known from the Late Bronze Age Aegean. To be more precise, Mycenae, which would be Late Helladic I, 16th century, or Mochlos, Late Minoan 1B, between 1500 1450 BC. And also from Betulonia on Sardinia, as well as from the Atlantic Bronze Age in general. Striking typological parallels to our Cypriot trident manifest themselves in various bronze specimens from Akko, 14th, 13th century BC, Tel Jedur, it's the late Bronze Age II, the 14th, end of the 13th century BC, Ugarit, end of the 13th century BC, the Jatort, about 1050 BC, or in an iron example from Böashkoy, Hattusha, in the layer Büyükale I, which is dated to the middle of the 7th, 6th century BC. The closest formal correspondence to our Cypriot iron trident, however, is attested by an iron trident with a rectangular central base, S-shaped curved arms, and prongs with a rectangular cross-section, deriving from Tel El Hama near the settlement of Beshan, which is dated about 10th century BC, and an iron specimen from Lachish, around 1000 BC, composed of 3 parts with an oval central base, as well as a third intentionally bent iron example with triangular central base, S-shaped curved arms and prongs, of obviously round cross-section from the Urartian chamber tomb in Al-Yishevas, which is dated to the end of the 8th, 7th century BC. Therefore, a Middle Eastern origin in the form of an import can be assumed for the trident from tomb 142 at Palepafos Plakes, whereby the Levantine coast is presumably the most probable contact or export region due to its relatively short distance to Cyprus. To conclude, in regard to richly furnished Cypriot elite burials of the late Cypriot 3B, Cypriot geometric periods, a total of 4 classes of monuments can be identified, which to my opinion definitely have to be interpreted as status symbols. 1 complete crested bronze helmet and 2 pairs of bronze cheek pieces belonging to this helmet type, the type of the crested helmet, from Palepafos and Kurion, without doubt can be addressed as very rare artifacts within the material culture of early Iron Age Cyprus, simultaneously providing hints for an elite warlike aristocracy. The bronze shepherd's crook from Lapithos can also be considered as unique for the early Iron Age period in Cyprus, and seems to go back to Cypriot forerunners from the late Bronze Age, maybe even representing a heirloom or antique of this period. Relying on Egyptian representations that connect shepherd crooks with a godlike pharaoh or gods themselves, an interpretation as a status symbol or a royal insignia seems more than plausible. According to the evidence from Assyrian reliefs, the bronze and iron mace heads can also be associated with high-ranking officials in a ruler's environment. Nonetheless, their exact function within early Iron Age Cyprus remains unclear. Eventually, the mace heads in some way could have been connected to Cypriot metalwork, as Nota Kuro assumes. At least a scepter-like function derived from Oriental parallels, however, seems more than obvious due to the rarity of this kind of objects in early Iron Age Cyprus. Finally, the iron trident, which currently has to be classified as a unique piece linked to the early Iron Age period in Cyprus, can be traced back to older bronze models from the late Bronze Age period, on former grounds recalling Near Eastern prototypes, most probably from the Levant. A function as a status symbol, not least in an anachronistic way symbolized by the attribute of the Greek god Poseidon, can be explained by its unique position within the early Iron Age Cypriot material culture, whereas a practical use as a weapon, fishing utensil, or feasting implement can rather be negated due to its dimensions and weight. Apart from probably the helmet specimens, the majority of the above discussed status symbols show strong influences from the adjoining Near East. Therefore, it seems appropriate to speak of a Near Eastern influence or tradition which obviously found its way in affecting the material culture of early Iron Age Cyprus. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much for this most interesting lecture.
Thank you.
I'm sure you are tired.
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
But we would like to make you respond to a few.
Yeah, of course, of course,
comments
of course, of course.
As you mentioned, most of these have been found in Palermo's cemeteries, and you may remember that I have dealt extensively with all four specimens which you have presented to us. I have remarks for every single one, but I will not enumerate them this afternoon, tonight, here, because it will take the whole
Another lecture.
hour which we have at our disposal. I will only mention the mace head with the round head,
Mm-hmm.
which and the head appears, as you rightly said, either in metal, and it is very heavy, or in stone from a very early stage. You call this a mace head. When referring to Cyprus in the Iron Age, you said you continue calling these mace heads, and you mentioned that no Bronze Age specimens have been found in the island.
Well, not of this type, or the type I showed at least.
Well,
Except you know more about those.
correct?
Except you know more about those. But not to my knowledge, there is typological related.
Lindy Crew, who is here,
Yeah.
will tell us that in the British Museum there is a bichrome wheel-made jug from Dromolaksha, which shows a warrior, and I discussed this in several of my publications, brandishing a weapon which is certainly one of these.
Yeah, well, in
And
depictions,
this-
okay. Yeah.
Well, what do you mean it's okay?
No, depictions, but not, I don't know the real
Well,
artifact.
it is a Cypriot depiction
Yeah.
of a Cypriot brandishing an exactly similar weapon of the late Cypriot I period.
No, I was
Do you
just,
know about it?
no, I don't, but actually I was just going for the artifacts and not for the depictions.
Yes, but it's something which one should not ignore.
Yeah, I wouldn't ignore it, but I actually it didn't come to my mind. But you can show it to me or send it to me. Okay, Lindy.
There's Lindy, there's your answer.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment? So
Yeah, please.
It seems, talking about the local Cypriot artifacts, that they appear in the 12th century. Unless
Could be.
Professor Karagiorgis can point to something earlier, which is an artifact in Cyprus.
No, this is
And it's terribly important that they range into the Cypriogeometric and, in few instances, earlier Cypriot.
yeah.
They are clearly symbols that are being used in the process of creating political identities.
Yeah, yeah.
But the geographical distribution is extremely important. They are all to the west.
Yeah.
Alepophos, Kurion, the bits
It's-
of Amathus.
Most of the south
Arkansas
coast.
also.
Well, you're right.
Is it a
I don't have an explanation.
lack of this archaeological visibility, or have you
May,
thought about
maybe, but okay, we have this late piece, let's say from Mace from Tamathos, which is dated to Cypriot too, and then again comes this hypothesis: does it have to do something with metalworking? But I don't trust in that or believe in that actually. But this is the only thing from Central Cyprus, but otherwise, well, it's a sea, and it's the roots probably, and of course you're going from coast to coast, and maybe not in the inland. This could be maybe an explanation. It could also be the archaeological record.
But it's also very important that we have this continuity.
Yeah.
Let
Well,
us separate.
I won't deny this. I don't deny it.
Correct.
Thank you, Christian, for this presentation. I don't have a question. I wanted just to say from the excavator's point of view, and I to congratulate for going the research deeper from where we stopped Vassos Karagiorgis. And as excavator, when I see this material, I always remember that me and the technicians of the Vonhoff Museum, we saved this material from robbers, developers, bulldozers,
Mm-hmm.
to end being accused as robbers and to be interrogated by policemen. And
Okay.
that's very, we are very proud because now the material clearly belongs to the scientific community for further research. And I have to add something because you repeated many times that this separate crew is the only we have from Latvia. There is another again from Palermo's area, from Cologne, which I have published in the RBAC 1112.
Okay.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of that. No, but good.
You missed
I will
that
put it to the
because
record. Yeah.
The RBAC 1112 is appeared last year, I think.
Okay. So
It's very
probably I was a little bit late.
it's a huge.
It's right out there. We'll show it to
Like,
you.
Yes, and sorry,
No.
and concerning the mace heads, there are two more coming again from Scales in the next.
But they're not published yet. No, I couldn't have used them. Okay.
Not just for the next
No,
one,
no.
again, Karagiorgis Rap.
Maybe you could send them to me if you have some photos. I won't use them in an illegal way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, and you several times stressed the symbolic value of all these objects, especially
Mhm.
the mace heads, which just brought to my mind it's too late for your objects and the period you are looking at it, but the mace head continues to have a very strong symbolic value. The Persian great king
Mm-hmm.
actually has a mace head bearer
Yep.
who walks behind him. He
Mhm.
may have never have used that
Mhm.
mace head, but somebody had to
Yeah.
bear it a few steps behind him. And you also said that, of course, one could add more other categories of objects, the famous obolo, for instance. But then, of course, the map, the distribution map would well look a little bit different, maybe. But I was thinking about the other category of objects, so-called scepters.
Mm-hmm.
I know of two possible ones, whereabouts not known anymore, at least to my knowledge. Is there something the like scepters, which of course it's, if we do not know what it really is, we call them scepters, but have something occurred to you in Cyprus?
Yeah, well, the famous Kurion Kaloriziki scepter, of course, from the 12th century probably. late 12th century, which is a unique piece. And well, when I first saw it, I thought, well, it must be huge, and it's like this. But I already did a talk about this, I guess, 4 years ago, a little bit, and it's yeah, kind of like a strange thing. You have those enamel technique and those inlays, which maybe derive from the Aegean, but you have an iconography which points to the Near East or Egypt with those birds of prey on top. But this is the only real scepter, I would say. But I could also imagine those mace heads being some kind of function like this. But okay, I can prove it. I can only say it's a rich furnished tomb, or most of them are rich furnished tombs. And they have those mace heads, and they are not that much. A total of maybe known 10 or 11. Okay, the new ones probably are coming, but at least published. So it's not much. If we compare it to swords or weapons, we have about the same number of at least maybe 10. Okay, excluding fragments, but it's not much for the whole early Iron Age of Cyprus. So, but the only scepter I definitely can define is the Korean one. But I would like to go with a mace heads for a similar function, let's say, at least.
Christian, what does it mean if 4 categories of elite objects you are now placing as imports from the Near East in this early Iron Age? What does it mean in the broader sense? Because if we're looking at the late Bronze Age, then Cyprus and Alasia seems to be politically at a higher level than the. I mean, here you compare with the Levant, and now the Levant seems to be the one that they are copying and seeking, rather than Egypt, let's say, which would make sense, or a great empire. I mean, what does this mean? Why are they turning to this insignia from the Levant to show their elite status?
A good question. If I knew, I would write a paper about it, probably. But okay, let's begin. Let's start from the beginning. The helmet, I would say, it comes from more or less Europe, from the decoration. Which I showed first, you know, the rosette decoration. Why those mace heads suddenly appear multiple or often in elite burials or tombs, I don't know. Maybe they saw the reliefs, or maybe it influenced them somehow, you know, those Assyrian palace reliefs, because they show up, and well, that's the thing. The tridents, yeah, well, it has a long tradition in the Near East from the late Bronze Age, and we only have this specimen which we have from Plaques, so it has to be some kind of meaning why they are doing this. But otherwise, well, if you see a good pair of shoes, or I do, I would like to have the same. Maybe they wanted to have it as a sign of insignia, I don't know. But it has to be some kind of iconography which has to deal with status. Why they took it from the Levant, I'm excluding the helmet right now. I'm not quite sure, but there we have the most examples. And on Cyprus, it's only some. But if I would have an explanation for this, but I think it's clearly derives from the Levant in the case of the mace heads, at least. The shepherd's crook, okay, it's the Egyptian iconography, but it could also fit. And yeah, we don't have that much specimens too. So why not Cyprus, crossroads of the Mediterranean, various influences from various parts of the Mediterranean. So maybe it was on vogue, I don't know.
Well, in Homer, if you mentioned Homer, the word skyptron for mace head is not the skyptron always which is used as the emblem of a king. in the agora, you give the scriptron an emblem
Mm-hmm.
as a symbol of authority to somebody
Mhm.
to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you refer to Dotapuru's article that these may be symbols of authority, and these may be symbols of authority of people who have a certain authority on the export of copper or on some other commodity. Not always royal, because these are very trivial things. They're not like the scripture of Purion.
Yeah, of
So-
course not. Of course not.
So these are just trivial things, not symbols of an elite, but symbols which give authority to somebody for a function, for a specific function.
But don't you belong to the elite then when you have a sign of
Well,
authority?
all these tombs
Comparable.
are elite. Well, there are not of there are tombs of
Elites and
important people.
Yeah.
I think it's worth going back for a minute to late Cypriot 3A in the
Hmm?
12th century, because at that time, to consider what Leland has been doing, Egypt has gone into a major crisis, into the third intermediate, and the so-called Phoenician area is
Mhm.
picking up.
Yeah.
And that's the center of trade at that time. Ugarit is gone, and
Yeah.
that part of the world is in direct contact with Cyprus
Yeah.
since the 12th century, and I think we have lots of evidence at this stage about this very close relation since the 12th
Mhm.
century, and I think that's why we see all these
Yeah, I do agree.
elite
yeah.
materials coming out. But I'm also wondering why you've excluded the obeloid districts.
Because I did a talk 2015 and I was talking about them already, so
Because
I
it
didn't
may-
want to do it again, but
because
I
it-
could have done. I can give you next week another lecture. If you
Because-
like the,
because-
I have it with me.
Because that's the only item that we find almost throughout Cyprus.
Yeah, yeah. I know, but I did a typology and I was talking a lot about Oberloy and I just wanted to get rid of it sometime.
And I have a real question.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you come across elite items made of iron in other areas around Cyprus that are earlier? Or is Cyprus using iron earlier than other places at this stage? Not that we have too many, we have more overload.
Yeah, no, the Oberloy I would classify as
Big argument over iron in Cyprus.
yeah, I know. It starts at about 1200 with all those knives, and well, I have the general opinion that it comes from the east, and it's going via Cyprus to Greece, and it goes down. But
My main question is, does the East create items made of iron that would be considered status objects? Because I don't.
well, the trident from Lachish, for instance, which is dated at about 1000 BC, I would say one could talk about this at least. Okay, and the mace heads, it's a difficult thing with
Yes,
all
I
the
know.
mace heads because you know, Luristan and the long tradition. But I would say from Lachish, yes, and it starts a little bit earlier. But the iron trident, I would say it is, despite the obeloy which we have on Cyprus a lot. But the funny thing is, iron and bronze obeloy are starting at the same time. At the same time, so why?
And only in Cyprus.
No, but
At this
yeah,
time.
yeah.
As early as that.
Well, okay, maybe in Crete we have some. It depends. The date is unsecure, but close relations we have, and we have iron, which could be the same date of the Cypriot specimen.
We now know that Krateftes were found in Greece in the 12th century. So if you have Krateftes, you have also Obeloy.
But
Well-
in bronze. In bronze, not in iron. The necklace bronze.
you know, I talked about it. Maybe we have one from Waffio, which is dated then to the 16th century BC. If it is an obelos, I'm not quite sure. Kilian Dillmeier did it. But we have the fire dogs, which Maran published, which are dated to Tyrion's treasure in the 12th century BC. So it's even earlier than the earliest Cypriot specimens.
That's why now we, I at least abandoned the idea that this is a Cypriot invention. It came from Greece.
Yeah, that's what I said also, but the material shifts, you know, the Greece specimens, if it is an obelos, it's bronze, and the fire dogs are also made of bronze from the Tyrion's treasure. The material goes from east to west, the iron material, I guess, but the tradition, with all those souvlaki trays and you know, the Minoan stuff, could also be a Greek tradition, but the material, the new material of iron was used, but simultaneously together with bronze. We have both bronze and iron overlay, which are descended. Yeah, just stronger, yeah, of course. You can see that the swords, of course.
May I give him another bibliographical information?
Please, Vasos.
Now that you are here in Cyprus, I refer you to an article which I wrote in a journal which is called Iconostation, and it's only in Cyprus, which you will find. And you will find it in this library. And 3 years ago, I wrote an article about the development of what you call the shepherd's crook, its development from the late Bronze Age down to the Byzantine and post-Byzantine period, and we have Cypriot saints which are represented holding such instruments on Cypriot icons.
Dated to which period then?
Dating, well, it's a tradition which continues in Cypriot iconography even to the present day.
You can send me the reference, or maybe I find it at Kari also.
Well, right in this library you have the
but I won't look it up today.
No. We need first.
I'm good.
Thank you
No, thanks.
very much.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Thanks for having me.